I love this show. Impressive production, way better than Survivor US. A 8.6 IMD rating, 3 wins, 8 nominations, and rumours for some of the most ambitious Survivor seasons upcoming. It's an absolute dream situation for a show, especially an international franchise. But it hasn't always been that way. The reboot in Australian Survivor happened in 2016, with it technically being Season 3. This was after Season 1 in 2002, which was very slow-paced. Too slow-paced. Therefore, after receiving poor reception, the show was eventually shelved until production decided to abuse a loophole for celebrity Australian Survivor, which is, quite frankly, a wee bit mental. Australian Survivor's first 2 reboot seasons were rather slow and had a lack of theme, but comparatively better than before. Then Champions vs Contenders was the following season, allowing for a boost in ratings, so production rode this momentum with Champions vs Contenders 2. Predictably, an all-star season was around the corner, although production may have jumped the gun on it slightly too early, and due to it being a very small field, they had to cast some obscure earlier boots that, due to their lower threat level, encapsulated a lot of the season's high placements. But production seemed to feel after the season returnees were the way forward, and had Blood vs Water than Heroes vs Villains containing returning contestants. However, a massive flaw with this dichotomy was that production wasn't introducing many new contestants into the field, which had the knock-on effect of them ironically having less returnees for future seasons. As a result, they couldn't make Heroes vs Villains the highly speculated full returnee season, and it fell below the 50-50 threshold, as there was only 11 returnees on a 24-person cast, creating quite an awkward skew. This wasn't helped by the fact All-Stars Brain vs Brawn and Blood vs Water had some of the worst twists ever seen in any English-speaking Survivor season. I mean, sure, Heroes vs Villains was a step up, a massive step up in my opinion for Australian Survivor, but production needed to prove themselves. They needed to combine the need for more new contestants to expand their pool of potential returnees, but also have an interesting season the audience would love. A season unique to Australian Survivor. And this is where Titans vs Rebels comes in. With negative rumours and even an alleged article circulating that production didn't actually like this season, it was already an expectation for superfans before the show began to not have high expectations. Then the first episode came out, and it was good. But then the second episode came out, which was also good. However, the third episode came out, and it was really good. Somehow by the end of the week, the first week, week 1, we had 2 of the best blindsides in the entirety of Australian Survivor, with a strong momentum being present throughout the rest of the season. In fact, if I were to do an international Survivor season ranking, including Survivor US and all the other ones around the globe, it would at least be in my top 10, potentially even in my top 5. And if you asked me if I would have considered putting an Australian Survivor season in my top 5 season rankings of all time a mere 2 years ago, I would have laughed you out of the room. Australian Survivor for the past few seasons were reusing extremely popular Survivor US concepts, likely as a way to draw in American audiences. This encapsulates All-Stars Brains vs Brawn, which technically is a new theme, but a 2-tribe version of Cagayan, Blood vs Water, and then the infamous Heroes vs Villains. While I understand these themes were to draw in an American audience looking to branch out from their original Survivor US franchise, setting yourself up against quite literally some of the best forms of reality TV media, let alone Survivor seasons, was always going to be an uphill battle. Additionally, the themes came off as bland and uninspired. Survivor US had already posed the question of what happens when blood goes against water, as well as if muscle or brain power was superior. It was essentially trying to solve a question that, at least mostly, had already been answered. Consequently, both Brains vs Brawn and Blood vs Water were deemed questionable at best by the community, on top of Heroes vs Villains, while good, still featuring largely top-heavy casting. In fact, after using well-known Survivor season themes in Survivor US for Australian Survivor, production had pretty much tried out most of their available season themes, so it's either they went back to naming each season after the year they came out, or they had to design new themes. Thankfully, they decided for the latter, and then the first time in 5 years they brought a new theme to light, Titans vs Rebels. A lot of the community then and still now think this theme is absolutely ridiculous, and I can understand why, but at least it was something new. Sure, some people were questionable picks on their tribe or just flat out on the wrong tribe, but at least a general concept of rule breakers versus rule makers were established. I didn't care if we had optimists versus pessimists, school smart versus street smart or whatnot. Both of those ideas, however, now are trademarked by me, by the way, but at least it was a unique identity Australian Survivor now had to its name. It gave the season a title, something you could easily identify the new season as, and the dichotomy had an intrigue for new viewers. Building off this season was also amazing. Just looking at the tribe divisions, we had representations of lots of fields, both from the perspective of underdogs and overdogs. Sure, there were extremely strong titans like Viola, Jaden and Nathan, but then there were brainy experts in their field like Charlie, Carolyn or Mark, or even business owners like Valeria, Eden or Kitty. This split in occupations was also seen prevalently on the Rebels tribe. It allowed for a wide field of jobs to be represented, allowing for different perspectives plus backgrounds to be seen. Additionally, it also allowed the tribes to be even challenge-wise in their own way, unlike the Brains tribe and Brains vs Brawn. From the post-season press, it seems the cast was roughly half applicants and half recruits, allowing for a strong structure of individuals who are knowledgeable about the game, contrasting fresh blood that, due to being new, can bring unique strategy to the game. If you're a long-time viewer of the channel, you know I advocate for Survivor seasons to have all applicants as recruits. It can become easily uninteresting fodder in the edit. In fact, we've seen this in prior AU Survivor seasons. So while I would obviously like Australian Survivor production to cast all applicants, it seems production has established some middle ground for a best of both worlds strategy. Shannon Guss, friend of the channel, interviewed Australian Survivor executive producer David Forster. I'll leave a link in the description of this video because it's an absolute gem of Survivor content, but importantly, David stated in this interview, production essentially trains contestants that are new to Survivor. This is why, in spite of having a lot of new recruits for modern Survivor, this season was able to pull off a strategic savvy season, and with a bit of digging you'll probably be surprised by the names of some of the recruits who knew very little about Survivor before the show. This ideology was also seen on the season, allowing for some of the most fluid Survivor dynamics ever seen. Pretty much every round of the merge featured brand new groups of people coming together with fragile alliances or voting blocks so they could come together to eliminate a common target. In fact, there were so many flips that were extremely calculated to Jaden, but this mix of emotional plus strategic flipping made Titans vs Rebels probably one of the first Survivor seasons in literal years where I would come into Survivor episode expecting literally anyone to get the boot. Anyone that has prior knowledge of Australian Survivor will know that they're pretty well known for their non-elimination episodes, and not in a good way. Understandably, they have been pretty big detractors for seasons, especially when used late in the merge where the dynamics are the most interesting and where the eliminations mean the most. In the previous season, Heroes vs Villains, A Blindside on Nina was stopped because of the isolation non-elimination twist. In production's defense, it was because a medevac set off their schedule, but they made the first challenge a massive accident liability. Not to mention, for some reason, the past two Australian Survivor seasons were final threes, burning up another potential full episode. Instead, they could have just had final twos. Now, Australian Survivor aren't at fault. I'm sure if they had their own way, they would want only 20 episodes, but they need 24 episodes to fill because of their TV schedule obligations. So Titans vs Rebels made the most of this by putting both their non-elimination episode twists pre-merge. The Saboteur one led to some fun moments pre-swap, and then the Alex swap, while generic, wasn't too harmful for the season. But this was the main point. For the first time ever, there was no non-elimination episode at the merge. This was huge, as from the final 14 and on, we had exhausted both non-elimination rounds, and with the final two we had a clean second half to the season, which was an absolute treat. There were new challenges that tested the players' creative thinking, really unique casting picks, and some really funny moments. I mean, where else am I going to see Jaden picking up the opposing tribe like two goldfish? The commentary calls were also incredible by JLP, understanding the power of narration, but also the importance of being quiet and letting the drama unfold between players, which I feel is a factor hosts outside of Survivor struggle to understand in the reality TV world. The rewards were substantial, allowing the contestants to be energized based on the island. Each reward location was oozing with atmosphere, and importantly, the rewards tied back to the overarching stories in each episode. It's all combined into this beautiful pot of glorious insanity that somehow, just by the end of it, worked out to be extremely impressive. Thanks for watching this video, and hey, comment down below your favourite Australian Survivor moment if you got this far. Nevertheless, have a good day, and peace!